I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.
Hey, it's Casey Scott, one of the hosts of Project Recovery Podcast. My road to recovery started with Pinnacle Recovery Center. If you or someone you know is suffering, do what I did. Call Pinnacle Recovery Center, 801-830-3355, or check them out online, pinnaclerecoveryut.com. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's a podcast about recovery. And we want to tell you to check out Pinnacle Recovery. That's where I started my road to recovery, and they are the sponsor of Project Recovery. I am Casey Scott. That is my co-host, Dr. Matt Woolley. How you doing, buddy?
I'm good.
All right. We got John Smith behind the board, and we're getting ready for a big show. But as we always do, before we get going, we do a little checkup, a little check-in on Casey, if you will.
Yeah.
And right now, I would say things are going swimmingly.
Swimmingly. That doesn't seem like a Casey word. You know, it seems like you're trying too hard.
It was one of those things, like, where, because I wanted to sound smart, but it didn't sound like me, huh?
I do that all the time, where you pull out something in your head, it sounds great, and you say it, and you're like, nah.
There's words all the time that I try to use, and
I call them Caseyisms.
Yeah, and you know who I try them out on?
Who's that?
My girlfriend.
Your girlfriend?
Yeah.
And to see if she'll still be your girlfriend, or?
Well, there's a lot of things I do.
Is she an English major?
No.
Yeah.
And neither am I.
Well, I think we know that.
Yeah.
So neither was I. So, you know.
What were you a major in? What was your generals in?
My general was psychology.
Okay.
Yeah, and I had a minor in philosophy.
When Matt Woolley was 13,
yeah,
what did Matt Woolley want to be when he grew up?
Oh, I just wanted to be a shrink.
Always?
I didn't even know what a psychologist was.
Did somebody give you your dream?
No. What did I want to be? I probably wanted to be a space cowboy when I was 13. I had a huge imagination. I probably thought I was going to be like a professional soccer player or a Jedi or something like that. No, or a skateboarder. I don't know.
Who were your idols as a kid?
George Lucas. I'm a huge Star Wars fan, nerd. I loved George Lucas and that whole universe that he created. I just remember being a kid thinking if I could write a story or make a movie like that, it would be a fun way to spend my life. But also a lot of athletes and things like that, yeah.
When I was young, my parents got divorced when I was in 5th grade, and it was the old school that you would just go with your dad every other weekend.
Right.
And so my dad's go-to was to take us to a movie.
Yeah.
But my dad was the type of dad that he wasn't going to sit through a kid's movie.
Okay.
So I remember being in 6th grade, seeing Conan the Barbarian, Stripes, and so those were
You're
the movies.
going to dad movies.
Yeah, dad movies, because he's like,
Yeah.
so I'm going to sit through it. It's going to be something that I want to watch.
So Bill Murray became your idol early on.
Oh, I loved Bill Murray.
Oh, of course.
Loved Ghostbusters.
But I wasn't allowed to. Well, I was allowed to watch Ghostbusters, but
Stripes.
Yeah, no, not Stripes.
Patrick Swayze.
Oh yeah,
I always
Roadhouse.
Yes, I always thought you'd be bigger. And I loved it when Sam Elliott said, "Hey, mijo."
Right.
Yeah.
Oh man.
So those, and that's what kind of got me into comedy was Bill Murray. I mean, I think that guy is a genius.
He is a genius. I think a lot of people that get into comedy are exposed to funny people when they're really young.
And my dad was funny. My brothers are funny.
Yeah.
And my mom's funny.
Is she?
Yeah, she's.
Okay.
You don't believe me?
Well, all the stories are she's kind of scolding you. But I assume...
Well, that's mostly my fault.
Okay.
That's not her fault.
All right. Yeah. That makes sense.
That
makes sense.
Yeah.
But I mean, I can see how like sitting through those movies, because all that stuff's new when you're a kid. All that kind of humor, you don't quite get it, but you try to get it, so you pay extra close attention. And so, if your dad was taking you to those kind of movies, I could see how. And you probably watch your dad laugh, and you're like, "Oh, I want to make my dad laugh," and your dad's a funny guy.
That was the biggest kick for me, if I could get adults to laugh.
Yeah.
I knew I could get kids to laugh. All you had to do is fart.
Yeah, it's not too hard.
Yeah.
Right, the bar's
and
low.
Trust me, farts are still funny.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
There's a well-timed fart will play in any room.
That's true.
Any
you may
room.
not be asked back, but it'll play in any room.
In any room. But yeah, making adults laugh when you're 10 or 11 was awesome.
I was kind of a nervous kid, so I mean, I was shy and self-conscious, so I would open up, but like just to try to make adults laugh, that would have made me uncomfortable, I think.
No, that's what I go for.
Yeah.
Hey, we're talking a little bit about comedy, and you're wondering, hey, this is a podcast about recovery.
Right?
There's nothing funny about recovery.
Nothing at all. We have to be serious about it.
And one thing I did learn when I was at Pinnacle Recovery Center is that I relied on humor as a crutch to get me out of a lot of situations, out of a lot of...
Didn't you get called on the carpet in your very first therapy session on that?
They were like, hey, this is not a joking time. And I realized that I would use jokes to get out of uncomfortable situations, how to deal with my own feelings. And I was like, hey, look, if everyone's focused on me, if I can make them laugh, then the focus is no longer on me. The attention's not on me.
It's a way of hiding.
Yeah. So he goes, it's a crutch. So for the first couple weeks in recovery, after I got scolded, I tried to stay away from the jokes. Now, we did this thing where there was a process group. There was 15 of us. Mm-hmm. And what you had to do is you take a piece of paper and you write your name on top. And then you pass it to the right. And the person was supposed to write down the first thing that came to mind when they thought of you.
Oh.
And then they pass it around the whole room of 15, and then you get back and you get your paper.
Okay.
Now, if you would have asked me before I went into recovery what that paper would have said.
Well, ask me.
What do you think that paper would have said?
So I would think that funny, exciting, humorous, extreme. Those would be words I'd associate with you.
And that's what I thought. I thought for sure. And if funny wasn't in the top 3, I'm not doing my job.
Right.
When I got the paper
Literally.
back. Yeah, when I got the paper back, funny was on there.
Yeah.
But it was lower on the list.
Okay.
It was thoughtful. It was caring. It was...
Did you get someone else's paper?
I know, right? But that was one of the things that kind of shocked me, because I thought, we talked about a little bit with my drinking, is that this is what people wanted. People wanted the funny. They wanted the outlandish. They wanted
Which
it in
is
your
a
face.
real part of who you are, but it kind of became the persona you had to put out there every day.
All the time. Even if I wasn't happy, I had to put that out there.
Yeah.
So it was very insightful and meaningful for me when I got back, and I was like, oh.
And those are some good qualities. You said thoughtful was number one.
Caring, intuitive. I mean, it was really neat to see that.
Yeah. Why is that? Because you had toned down the humorous, kind of guarded side of yourself, and they got to know you that way? Is that why you think those were on the top of the list?
I think because I wasn't relying on humor, and I wasn't focusing on my attention. I was really trying to work on me and who I was, and doing a deep dive into myself. Okay. And so that, so I think I was
allowed those other qualities to come out.
I think I was just trying to be me. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know who that was, but I was trying to figure out why I was here, what I was doing, and just kind of working through it that way. And so it felt good that it wasn't boring or boisterous or negative.
Would you have worried that if people don't see you as funny, they would have thought, you would worry that people would think you're not interesting?
Yeah.
Arrogant. Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So it was.
But didn't. That's not what came.
That wasn't on there, and so it was a pretty cool experience, and it was a cool exercise.
So now that you're out of recovery and you're back doing your thing and everything, do you find you have a little more balance in your personality?
A little more
you're
balance.
Allowing those other things to come out.
I have to be mindful of going, hey, you don't have to be funny.
Yeah,
because nobody's paying me right now.
Right.
And
that's why I don't laugh at your jokes.
I get it. And if I want to be funny, I can be funny. If I don't want to be funny, I don't have to.
Yeah.
And
do you feel more freedom to be like thoughtful and
I feel more freedom to be me and not be on.
Okay.
And
so whatever comes out comes out.
Yeah, good or bad.
Man, you're being an authentic self. We call that the authentic self.
And that was a big term that was thrown around in rehab.
Yeah.
Find your authentic self.
It's a powerful term.
Hey, we're talking a little about comedy and humor, and that's going to play into our guest. We've got Andy Gold here. Andy, how are you?
I'm good. I wasn't sure if I was supposed to jump in right there or just kind of hang back and wait for the intro.
No, you did great. Yeah,
Perfect.
yeah.
Wonderful.
So if we were bringing you to the stage, because Andy Gold is a stand-up comedian, it would go something like this. He spent 10 years in heroin, and now he's spending 20 minutes in entertaining you. No?
Well, I mean, it would depend on if I were doing a feature set, then it'd be 20 minutes. If I were headlining, it'd be more like an hour.
I don't think you got that job, Casey.
No,
Yeah.
I know.
You just failed that interview.
But I wouldn't say anything. I'm not a really picky comic when it comes to telling the MC what to say about me. I usually just say my name, and I'll let the act speak for itself.
Authentic. He's being authentic.
The audience will figure it out.
So let's find out a little bit about Andy Gold. I kind of stole your thunder and stole your joke, which is not a joke, but you spent 10 years in heroin. How did that happen?
Well, I spent 10 years in active addiction.
Okay.
The last 6 of which, that's when the opiates took hold. How did that happen? Well, I mean, it happened. The first drug use happened when I was a kid. I was a party kid. And I was just like a lot of kids, interested in being cool.
How old are you?
I'm 34.
Okay, so you started partying at what age?
Junior high, 14, 15. And I came up LDS, and I had older brothers who partied. And the partying lifestyle just looked a lot cooler and more exciting and more enticing than the other option of going to church and following that path. That looked really boring, and it felt really weird to me.
And for listeners that aren't familiar with LDS, that means?
Latter-day Saint.
So it's the
Mormon.
church you grew up in,
Yes.
and they are famous for frowning on drinking and all of that.
Yes, and as I got into drug use, it pulled me a little bit away from the church because, Mormonism and heroin use, those two things are pretty at odds with each other.
Yeah, any church activity and heroin use probably don't go together.
But, I'll kind of give you the summary here. I was just a party kid. Weed, ecstasy, then it became cocaine and harder drugs. And my senior year in high school is when I discovered opiates. And that was the first drug where I'm like, oh, I actually really love opiates. The other drugs, it was like cool to have fun, to party. But when opiates took hold, I'm like, I just prefer being on opiates.
Now,
They
let me
just
ask you
feel
this.
good.
Did you get into opiates because a doctor prescribed it, or was it just kind of...
No, I bought the pills from friends, and I bought them with the same, intention of buying weed and buying ecstasy because I thought it would be fun. I thought it would be cool. But they just took a lot harder than the other drugs did. That became my DOC, as we say in the community. My
That's
drug
a
of
drug
choice.
of choice,
Drug
yeah.
of choice.
I have a good friend who's an attorney, and he had a shoulder surgery, and I was joking with him. I said, well, I guess you'll be, taking some pain pills and watching movies this weekend. And he said, no, I won't take any. And he had an accident when he was younger. And in his words, he said, as soon as I took those, he became addicted, and he's recovered now. But he said, as soon as he took those, in his words, oh, that was my jam. And it scared him. Is that
Yes.
how you felt?
Yeah, minus the part about being scared. I was excited.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I felt like I found something that was really cool. I was young. I don't think I had enough respect for the strength of opiate addiction yet. Young, invincible.
And nobody
like you
talked
are.
about it back then, really, as being
No, this is
such
the
a
early.
bad
This
thing.
is the early 2000s when the opiate epidemic, I think, was just starting to get going. When it was just budding.
When you took that first opiate, what did it do? And do you remember kind of how the feeling took over your body? I mean, what happened?
pure, I was just content. I was just so content with whatever. All right, I had homework that I wasn't going to do. That's fine. I just feel so chill right now. It wasn't this spastic, euphoric kind of feeling that cocaine gives you or ecstasy gives you. It wasn't this belligerent party and drunkenness that alcohol gives you. It wasn't this kind of like spaced out, stupid, giggling stupor that pot gives you. It was just this feeling of being at peace, cool, content, but I still feel like I had my faculties together. I could drive, I could function, but I just felt nice with everything. So
how long did you take opioids before you realized, I think I got a problem?
by the end of my senior year,
That quick?
that quick, Loratab became Percocet. Percocet became Vicodin. Vicodin became OxyContin. And by the end of my senior year, I was taking like 10 pills a day at
Really?
$60 a pop. So
Where were you getting all that money?
well, that's why I got some felonies on my record.
Okay.
Okay. I became a criminal. Shoplifting, writing bad checks, ripping off drug dealers. And then I knew where to get a bunch of cocaine to sell to my friends who were addicted to cocaine. I didn't think of myself as a drug dealer, but the Centerville Police Department sure did. And I was arrested on my dad's birthday in 2004. And when they cuffed me, they came to my parents' house and knocked on the door and cuffed me. I remember that feeling so well. It was just such this visceral, intense feeling of my life is over. I'm now a criminal. They're going to haul me off to prison. Like everything that I thought life could be, that's not happening. Now I'm just a junkie and a criminal. And
was that the first time you had that sort of self-reflection?
That was the most intense experience of self-reflection I can recall. I feel like that's when the partying stopped and the life of being a junkie began.
I know exactly what you're saying because I remember lying on my back, looking up at the sky, and the sirens flashing, and knowing that right now it's never going to be the same.
Yeah.
It's never going to be the same. And I remember sitting there going, what have I done?
Right.
How did it get this way? How am I here? And it's almost an out-of-body experience that you're looking at yourself and you're going, what has transpired? What has happened?
It's surreal. It's a moment of actually looking at yourself objectively, I think, when you're not deluding yourself and lying to yourself like, oh, I'm just a party guy who likes to drink, or I'm just a party kid who likes to pop pills, and, it's expensive, so I do some stuff to get the pills.
And you've probably had a brush-in with the law before. And
yes.
And to some people that go, wasn't that your rock bottom? I mean, didn't you see this?
No, I was. I thought I was a kid who was partying and having fun, and I was just having more fun and doing a better job of having fun than the other kids.
It's interesting that you say that because sometimes I would say that to my friends when I would overindulge or I would drink too much, and they're like, "Man, you were really out of control." And I was like, "Yeah, I was," and they were like, "No, that's not good." And I go, "Well, wait a minute. I thought that was the goal, guys. I thought it was whoever was the drunkest won. I won. And they're like, no, you didn't. You're not.
Everybody was seeing you, and probably the same for you, differently than you were seeing yourself. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, and even my other friends who I ran around and used with, I remember them saying things like, dude, Andy is just buying OxyContin all the time.
Yeah.
Even the other kids who were selling me OxyContin were commenting like, dude, you buy a lot. Way more than
So the drug dealers were saying, buddy.
We're drug dealers. We're not Costco.
Well, and I remember once when I couldn't get any OxyContin, I had to buy a bunch of Loratab, and I just took them all in front of the kid. And then he called me like an hour later. He's like, hey, man, I just wanted to make sure that you're alive because that was a lot.
Your behavior made a drug dealer feel worried about you.
Yes.
Wow.
And normally that's not a response a drug dealer gives you.
No. My reaction was like, yeah. I'm pretty cool. I'm pretty cool.
So same as Casey, kind of like that. I won. I'm pretty cool.
This is.
They're going to tell stories about me.
A badge of honor, right?
Yes, they're going to tell stories about me.
Yeah.
I'm establishing a little status amongst these group of people as the most hardcore and coolest kid.
Why do you think that was important?
Well, there's a really good question. Why was it important to be? Well, I think like a lot of addicts, it stems from kind of feeling like an outsider. Somehow. I was kind of a class clown. I was a funny kid. I didn't do that well in school. I didn't love church. I didn't really take after a lot of the same things that the other men in my family took after. They were outdoorsy, type A, men's men, and I was kind of the creative weirdo a little bit. And feeling like an outsider like that, I think, is a very profound thing, that when you're a kid, you're not really equipped to deal with or process. And, in retrospect, I was kind of turning to whatever kind of outlandish behavior I could to get kind of acceptance, validation, even if it was self-destructive and to my own peril.
Yeah, and to kind of put a psychologist spin on what you're describing it perfectly. That's a time of identity development. Now that we're adults, we could describe our identity, and it may still be in development a little bit. But when you're a kid, you're trying everything out. I had a graduate professor that said kids try on personalities like jackets. You're trying to find one that fits. And if you felt kind of on the outside, you weren't like the other men in your family, so that wasn't your identity. And school, that wasn't really your identity. And church wasn't your identity. Then you were probably searching like every kid is. And that's one of the reasons. A lot of play, brain development gets a lot of play when we talk about alcohol and drug use and why that's so damaging for kids. But what you're describing, in my opinion, is just as problematic, if not more so, because you're searching for an identity, and that becomes who a person is. And if your identity becomes, like you've already said today, I was the party kid, I was the fun kid, I was the kid that can freak the drug dealer out by taking a handful of opiates, that's a dangerous identity. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a deadly identity.
Yeah, and for a lot of kids, the drug dealer, the other kid that was selling you the pills, probably was worried about your safety. Like, that's probably why he called, wondering is this guy going to answer the phone? Is he okay?
Yeah, that's exactly why he called. But, the gravity of that call and what it meant didn't really hit me.
Went right over your head because your identity was so wrapped up in being that guy.
And I also knew that I could take that many pills, and I would be fine. And I wasn't really worried the way he was. And, yeah, I kind of... it was a little feather in my cap.
So the party jacket fit you well, and you started opioids your senior year.
Yeah.
And by the end of your senior year, you said you're hooked.
Yes.
How long did you party before you got arrested on your dad's birthday?
It would have been, let's see, a good 4 years of partying through high school. And, I partied hard. That's why I say even before the opiates took hold, I was still in active addiction. Because if you saw me in high school, there was a 100% chance I was on something,
And that just was your everyday life?
Mm-hmm. Wake and bake. And I still managed to play football and baseball. And
passed your classes?
Passed my classes.
Did your parents have any idea how deep you were in?
They had some idea. But I had an older brother who was also in active addiction, and his addiction by that time had really gotten out of control. And I think he was kind of the focus in terms of like messed up kids. And
so he was worse than you
at that time, yeah. And they, in my opinion, did the right thing with my brother. This is my brother Eric, and they set firm boundaries and said, we're not going to contribute to your destruction. And fast forward a few years, my brother overdosed and died.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Well, thank you, man. But that understandably had a huge impact on my parents, and they said, well, we're not doing that with Andy. We're not, because what the professionals told us didn't work with Eric. We set those boundaries. We did the right thing. So what we're going to do with Andy is we're going to coddle him and micromanage him, and it was really enabling. And then fast forward 3 years ago, I had my own overdose in their basement. They were home, and the paramedics came, and they gave me some Narcan, and obviously it worked because I'm here today.
Yeah.
But, and I'm sorry if I'm getting ahead of everything here, but
no,
I think my parents kind of learned this really grim reality that the loved ones of addicts have to accept, and it is bleak that there's nothing you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes there's just nothing you can do. The addict needs to do that work, and there has to be the desire for the addict.
Because they tried it both ways, right?
They tried it both ways, and both ways failed.
Yeah.
Well, I've said it before on this podcast when I was going through my divorce, and my ex-wife had said, "Why couldn't you quit for me? Why can't you quit for the kids?"
Yeah.
And my response was, "I've tried. Trust me, every morning I look in the mirror, I try to quit for you. I tried to quit for the kids." And one thing that I've learned in my recovery, and I always say that because what I'm doing is my recovery, is I had to do it for me.
Yes.
And I'm the only one that can do it. I can't do it for you. I can't do it for them. And if I don't want to do it, it's not going to happen.
That's
and
right.
you've got to find the man in the mirror and look back and go, yeah, I'm done. I don't want this anymore. And I truly feel like I've hit that point and I'm moving forward. But I had to do it for me, and I think you had to do it for you. I want to go back a little bit and find out how your older brother's overdose and death affected you in your addiction.
Okay, so by this time, it was 2006. It was a couple of years after I had been arrested on my dad's birthday. And by this time, there's no more OxyContin. Now it was heroin. OxyContin was too expensive, and heroin was cheaper. That's why I turned to heroin.
Let's talk about that for a second, because there was quite a few people in my recovery center up at Pinnacle that had mirrored that same experience, where I think a lot of people get hooked on the opioids and the pills, and then at some point they can't afford it, they can't get it, and heroin is just cheaper and more accessible?
Yes, cheaper and more accessible, although, I mean, the experience of getting heroin was usually a lot grittier and scarier and more dangerous, because now you're dealing with not just high school kids who were copping their grandma's OxyContin prescription, but now you're dealing with bona fide, drug dealers on the streets and from Honduras who are going to be there for 6 months at a time, hoard some money, and, get on back to their country. But people who just care about you less. Not that the OxyContin drug dealers cared about me.
But the heroin dealer's not going to call you and see if you're okay after you take it.
Right, yeah. And so by this time, I'm a heroin addict. Okay, I had pretty much faked my way through drug court by using methadone, which they didn't test for, and also finding out what days I got tested. You would call every day. When I got arrested the first time, they put me on drug court. Okay, and you would call a hotline every day, and they would tell you
your color or your number.
Yeah, and I'm not going to explain how, because I don't want to give anybody any ideas who might be listening who's in active addiction. But I figured out which days I would be tested, figured out how long heroin was in your system for, and I used all the way through drug court. Just faked it, which did two things. It fed my ego as being a master manipulator and being smarter than everybody in the room, and also sort of planted the seeds of, okay, I'm a drug addict. This is my life. And when Eric died, he died on a cocktail of prescription painkillers and methadone. And I'm the one who introduced him to methadone. Oh. Yeah. And I just felt like, I just played a real role in killing my brother. And that guilt was entirely too much for me to process it. And I just said, okay, I'm just a piece of, it's KSL.
Garbage.
Thank you. Yes. So the impact my brother's death had on me was not to get squared away and get my act together and get clean. The guilt just accelerated the addiction.
And that's so often the case, where you feel so terrible and you over-attribute that responsibility to yourself, so you feel that guilty, you feel like garbage. And for a lot of folks, that sends them farther down the rabbit hole. And
that's exactly what happened with me. If I may say something real quick about that.
You bet.
With that, 9+ years clean now, and I've done a lot of work. I know that guilt now isn't there anymore. And that took some years to get over. That didn't happen when I was right out of rehab. That took some years to get over. But when me and my brother were in active addiction, we weren't ourselves. He was using me, I was using him. Our relationship had deteriorated from being brothers to being junkies who used each other. And I know that he would know that.
Yeah.
Just like I know that.
Yeah, and so that's your new framework of when you think about that?
When I'm not in active addiction, I don't hurt my loved ones. I have no interest in hurting my loved ones. That's the last thing I want to do. I'm honest. I don't manipulate. When I'm not in active addiction, I'm like a decent guy, which seems so simple, but it was a long time coming to have that.
When you're in that place, you don't realize the difference, do you?
No, not at all. And it's so toxic because I thought I didn't deserve forgiveness, even self-forgiveness. I thought I wasn't worthy of that. I haven't done anything to earn feeling good about myself. Everything I've done, I should feel awful about myself.
Mm-hmm.
Was that the toughest part of your recovery thus far, is learning to forgive yourself?
Yeah. Yeah.
And we talk about it a lot on this podcast, and a lot of addicts have been through these doors and have said that is, you learn to forgive a lot of things, but the toughest one is forgiving yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's a lie you tell yourself that you don't deserve the forgiveness. And like I said before, the best word I can think of that lie is just toxic, because it's not true. Not forgiving yourself isn't helping you. And the other people in your life, they want you to forgive yourself because they know that's how they're going to get their son back, their brother back. They want you to have a little bit of mercy on yourself.
And can you talk about that process for you? Because I think it's different for everybody. Can you talk about that process of going from not being able to forgive yourself and holding on to that desire to punish yourself to learning to forgive?
So for me, it was when I got clean. Okay, I started to notice the things I do when I'm clean. Okay, when I was using, I was a pathological liar, a thief, and a manipulator, all of that. And I get clean, I do some work, and I just start to observe. And this observation didn't happen overnight. It was slow and steady. I started to observe who I was when I'm clean and who I am when I'm clean. I'm like, okay, do I lie? No, I'm pretty honest. Do I still? Nope, not at all. Do I manipulate? Sometimes when I have to, but usually not. And do I hurt people for my own gain? Nah, I don't. And the reason that was really comforting and helpful to me is because that was objective. That was actually the reality. That wasn't founded in some, mystic kind of vague set of ideas.
This wasn't stories you told your friends or your parents.
Right.
Like, I'm a good guy. Who would do that?
I am, in fact,
These things.
a good guy.
Yeah.
And
so that objectivity helped you create that contrast between me when I'm using and me when I'm not using.
Different people.
Yeah.
Different people. And that's not a feeling or a hope. That's an objective truth. And that's powerful. Mm-hmm. I'm like, wow, I'm not that piece of garbage, actually. I'm actually okay. I don't do those things. And there was no distinct moment of clarity, but even today when I actually think about that, it's sort of like letting a breath out. It's kind of a relief to know that nightmare life, that nightmare person is not
who you really are.
Yes.
So let me ask you, you were in jail. You got arrested on your father's birthday. Mm-hmm. How long were you in jail for?
Just a few days that time. I had a few more weekend stays here and there. It was a bummer. I was going through withdrawals. My cellmate was not the most pleasant character. He had a swastika tattooed behind his ear. I'm like, well, he and I are not going to find very much common ground, I'm afraid. Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm going to make any new friends in jail.
So when did your road to recovery begin?
So I overdosed in the fall of 2009. Okay, October 21st, 2009. Get a load of this. This was my grandma's birthday.
Oh, wow.
So got arrested for selling coke on my dad's birthday, overdosed on my grandma's birthday. And the paramedics came. They gave me some Narcan.
And for those who don't know, Narcan is a substance they introduce to your body when you're overdosing, and it just brings you right back. I mean, it's saved numerous lives.
It has, yes. And there's this, not to get derailed, but there's this meme out there that really annoys me. It's people who complain about their insulin being too much, but Narcan is free for junkies. I'm like, I agree that the insulin is too much, but let's...
Right, Narcan saves lives.
Yeah. But we don't have to get into that whole can
So
of worms.
they pump you with Narcan.
Yep, and
pop up.
I have fleeting... I don't pop up. I don't remember that at all. It wasn't like Pulp Fiction. If I did pop up, I don't remember it. Mm-hmm. My system was really in some trouble. They take me to the ICU, and I have flashing memories of the doctors. They actually had to, restrain me, and I was, swearing at them because I didn't really know what was going on. I temporarily lost vision in my right eye, and my pH levels were, 20 times higher than they should be. the first real memory I have is waking up in the hospital, and I knew what had happened. And my dad is sitting there just looking deflated, like out of gas. And my dad was 6'5", 280, big, intimidating guy. A lot of his fathering techniques were built around him being intimidating, and it's scary if you mess up because what will dad do? And this was not that guy. This was not the scary, intimidating. This was a man who was broken. And he said that I overdosed, and he says, Andy, I'm through being mad at you. It's like all he could muster up is, I'm just through being mad at you. And when I was in the ICU for about a week, they had to keep me there. I had around-the-clock visitors who were coming and just showering me with love and support. And just, I don't deserve all of this. Like, why are all these people? I've stolen from a lot of these people. I've been nothing but an enemy to so many of these people, but they didn't care. They just wanted me to get better. And sorry, I wasn't expecting to get so emotional.
No, it's okay.
I tell this story sometimes, but they had an intervention for me, and I went right from the hospital to treatment. And that was when the road to recovery officially began. And the first, like, real powerful realization I had was just so many people who loved me and didn't think of me as being this despicable junkie, but just wanted Andy. And that was a big moment for sure. There was still a lot of challenges that lay ahead in recovery. A lot of the stuff I was taught in rehab that just, I don't know about some of this weird stuff. But that was where the road to recovery began. Yeah.
So you went to a rehab facility?
I did. Here in Utah. It's a place called Cold Creek Behavioral. Have you heard of it?
No.
It was in Layton at the time. It was an inpatient, and it was a tough program. It was 45 days inpatient, no caffeine, no nicotine, no sugar, and 8 hours a day of treatment, whether it be meetings, yoga, some weirdos who would come and rub sage on me and all of this other stuff that, like you were talking about humor and recovery. Some of that stuff I felt like, if I'm going to deal with this, I got to deal with this with humor because I'm just not on board with this yogi who's coming.
Wasn't your jam.
Nope. If it is your jam, like, good on you.
Right, and we've talked a lot about that, right, Casey, that people have different things that they connect with. And so some people do connect with that kind of, I think the sage is a Native American sort of approach to spirituality, but that wasn't yours. What did you connect with?
So the science behind it was very, very helpful when they showed us what the brain does in active addiction and what it does when you're not in active addiction.
Mm-hmm. So you're very science-based, and I think we're going to get to that coming up in just a few seconds. You're listening to Project Recovery.
Of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.